Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of A Voice in the Hollow. I am your host, Miguel Ortega, and this is my co host, Tran. I can't hear you. Let's fix this right here. All right, that should work.
Hey everyone.
There we go. Okay, cool. So let me see if we have anybody already on here. Holy crap, that's a lot of people. Okay, so we have a few. Not a lot of people, just a lot of posts. So we don't usually get this many messages right off the bat. So welcome. Let's see. DJ Dejab, DJ Aben Shaban. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, so I'm sorry. But hello. And then who do we have here?
Dr. Zigzag.
Dr. Zigzag. I know what those are. So, okay. How's it going? And then Marcus. Hey, thank you for the kind words. So today we're pretty much at the very end of this process.
We're totally at the end.
We're totally at the end. So
yeah, we're totally at the end.
We're at the could be better stage of things. So we're just like, hey, this could be better, that could be better. And one of the things that we always knew was a big issue that we needed to come back around to was, you can see it on the screen right here. Whenever you have something that is very thin and very out of focus, it looks hideous inside of Unreal.
Yeah, I'm trying to select it.
Yeah, and so you could see how you just get this
there you are.
really nasty kind of ghosty look, and then you get these kind of black
black artifacts. So like I just selected it so you can actually see what it's supposed to look like when it's framed in the shot, you know, and then what it looks like right now. And there's just really bad artifact on things that are blurry and very thin.
Yeah, and I just wanted to show why that's happening. So I think the important thing, like when we first started doing this, like we had only really used Unreal when we started this project for like 4 or 5 weeks, so we didn't have a ton of experience with Unreal. And I mean, it's pretty obvious now, but it never clicked with us that the depth of field was done as a post effect. Like for some reason, I thought it was actually trying to do some sort of physical camera, but it is just 100% doing a depth of field in post effect. So what's unfortunate is certain things, like if you've ever heard of like deep images, they're aware of the actual depth of the pixels or like what's behind a certain pixel. I don't think this is. So what's actually happening here is when something is very thin, let me just show it on my screen real quick because it'll make more sense. So Tran, I'm going to take over for a second. Okay?
Yeah, that's totally fine.
So this is going to be inside of V-Ray, but it's just a very good way of illustrating why this is a problem in Unreal. So you can see I have like this little scene here that if I were to render, it's going to look like this. And I intentionally placed a very thin like bar cage in front of it. Okay. So if I were to come over here and turn on, this is something I showed in my look development class. But if I come over here and I turn on physical camera, the first thing you'll notice is that the image just gets darker, which is just because that's what physical camera does by default, because the default f-stop is set to f8. But let's just say I set the f-stop to something like 1.4. Okay, there's a few things, even though this is a physical camera, it's still not behaving like a physical camera until I turn on a few things. Specify focus, enable bokeh effects, and enable depth of field. Once I do that, it is actually now behaving like a real physical camera. Enable motion blur is another one, but since this has a movement, I'm not going to turn that on. Okay, so let's say I want this sphere to be in focus. You could see that under my display heads up display, I've enabled object details, and that's giving me this right here. That's telling me the distance of that object from the camera, 24.493. Okay, so if I come over here to my specify focus or focus distance, 24.493, I think it was. Like that.
Close enough.
Yeah, you can see that the sphere is completely in focus. But what I want you to notice is that even though the cage is still there, because it is so out of focus, it almost entirely disappears, right? So you can see a very, very subtle ghosting, but it's, for the most part, it's completely gone. So if I were to save this image out, desktop, and let's call this with proper depth of field, okay? So this is a physically accurate camera rendering what depth of field should look like, okay? So in a real world scenario, if you were to get close to a chain link fence and rack your focus to something in the distance, that chain link fence will basically vanish, right? Which is pretty incredible. Okay, so now that's, again, that's the physically accurate way. So now the way Unreal is doing it is different. So if I come over here and I go to my AOV passes, which are my render passes, and I turn on just to back to beauty, which will give me like the lighting, whatever, lighting, GI, caustics, all this stuff. And let me just turn on my Z depth. And I'm just going to set the distance of my Z depth here. So I'm just going to come over here. I personally like to set this. And I'm going to create two depth of fields, one with and one without filtering. Okay. So we're going to recreate this in Nuke just to show you the problem and why Unreal has issues with doing depth of field on very thin objects, again, like this cage. Okay, so now we have all these guys here. I'm going to come over here and let's just turn on our bucket, and I'll set this to EXR multi-channel, and I'll just kick this off render. Jesus. Yes, that's exactly. Illustrate how it works inside of Nuke, because it's basically doing the exact same inside of Nuke.
Are you trying to kill the render?
I'm trying to kill the render, and
it's just goes to crap.
Yeah. So covers. Yeah. Well, this is definitely because of the whole what am I saying? The whole streaming thing, the fact that it's streaming 4K. Yeah. All right, so let me just turn on my my physical. I'm going to turn off the physical camera here, and that should render much faster. Okay. So right now, the way we've rendered this out, you can see the cages there. Okay, so that's great. So let me just save this guy out. So save that out with bad depth of field. And let's just open up the lovely Nuke. And I'll show you guys what the problem is. And not only am I going to show you what the problem is, we're going to show you what we hoped was going to be the solution in in Unreal, that ended up not being much of a solution at all, and then what we ended up having to do in order to get it to work. Okay, so let me go to my desktop here. And let's grab these two guys here. So we could compare the one that has the proper depth of field. And you could see, you could kind of get a very soft feel of where the cage used to be. And then we got this guy here. Okay. So setting up depth of field in Nuke is kind of confusing because the node just has a ton of stuff. So if I go to filter, sorry, where am I going to? Filter, Z defocus. We have this guy, let's throw him in there. Right, and this node is just the freaking worst when you're starting at, because you're like, oh my God, there's all these different things. There's all these different maths. There's all these drop downs and so many settings. But for the most part, let's just do this. So we're setting under our channel, we're just going to go to other. So that should be our Z depth. And let me just double check and make sure that that is the correct one. So I'm going to shuffle this out real quick just on the side here so I could see what other looks like. And I believe Z depth, since I have two Z depths, so it's Z depth 1, it has the hard edges here. So let's just set this to other 1. Okay, there we go. All right, so we set what channel we want to use as our Z depth. And the reason why it's under other and not Z depth or depth is because we have two different Z depths. And that's for a whole other thing, but I always render two different Z depths, one with anti-aliasing and one without it. So this is the one without it, and that's the one we want to use. Okay. So let's close this guy over here. So that's our channel. Under math, we're going to set this to depth. Under result, we could go to focal plane setup, grab this little point and select the red ball. Okay, so that immediately is showing us what's in focus and what is not. Red and blue are front and back focus, right? And you could see that this point has a tiny bit of green there. Okay. Below that, you can see we have focal plane and focal point X and Y. That's just to show, as I move this point around, you could see that those attributes are changing. So this is the actual depth in Z. And then focal point is just showing you that point in 2 dimensions. So X sideways, Y up and down. Remember, if you ever get confused about what is X or what is Y, just do the cheerleader. Pretend you're a cheerleader. X to the sides, Y up and down. You'll never forget. Right? So depth of field, as I bring this up, you could see that it starts bringing in the green, letting you know this is in focus. Okay? So depth of field is probably the most misused term in all of CG. You'll always go like, oh, it needs more depth of field. A lot of people say that, myself included, will say, give it more depth of field, meaning what we mean is we want more out of focus, but giving it more depth of field means everything is in focus. So it's actually the opposite of what you think. So when you see depth of field, it's actually saying make more stuff in focus, and you can see the green area gets bigger or smaller depending on how you move that slider. So depth of field will set this back to result, and you can see that this guy is now in focus. Below that, we have our size, 5 and 10. This is your minimum and your maximum. The maximum obviously has to be bigger. So just for the hell of it, let's crank this up so that we could really see the effects and the flaws of this. And you're going to start seeing how this doesn't look that different from the stuff that Tran was showing here. Do you see that? It's actually very similar. Look at these black ugly lines here.
Yeah.
Look at the black ugly lines there.
I also
wait, move that out of the way so so you can see the black lines there. You can pull that up if you want.
Well, I also grabbed a photo, a real photo of what you would expect.
Yeah.
So if you look at just an image I just randomly found on the internet, and you look at the stems that are very thin, they actually become see-through, and then that's what you really expect when there's a stem here. Something is so thin, you actually will see right through it, and the result you're seeing here is trying to do that. It's the same thing.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that here. So, a question: do I work with ACEs? No, we're right now keeping it very simple with just sRGB. So, all right, so you can see that right now we're getting the exact same problem. And when you look at this, you're like, wait a minute, but why does this problem exist? And if you think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense. So as I showed you with this image here, when something goes completely out of focus, it basically becomes see-through for the most part. It's not actually see-through, just I guess the rays are seeing across it, but it's not actually completely see-through. It's just an optical illusion kind of. But when you have this, it's trying to recreate that. But the problem actually makes a lot of sense why it's a problem to begin with. This nuke does not know what this image is, right? All it sees are colors, pixels, and the resolution, right? So when you tell it to go this out of focus, this is a very simple scene with just a couple of spheres. But let's pretend that wasn't a sphere. Let's pretend that was this part right here that is occluded was a beautiful woman or beautiful man's eyes, right? How can you expect Nuke to know what that looks like when it goes out of focus? You would be saying, hey, I want you to draw these beautiful eyes behind this bar. It has no idea what it is. So all it does is it grabs the pixels next to it and it basically smears it to try to fill in that hole. So it would never recreate the hole. Hence, it would never fill out that sphere the way it does there because it doesn't know it's a sphere. This doesn't know that's a sphere, wouldn't know if there are eyes behind it. So when you look at the thing that Tran showed, it doesn't know what the girl's hair looks behind the branch. So it creates this really ugly ghosting effect. Trying to recreate it, you can see it actually creates like a box here. It just doesn't know that's a sphere.
Yeah, and you got all the weird black artifact.
Yeah.
And harsh lines.
So what is the workaround? So in 3D, the super simple workaround is, hey, just grab that stuff. Easiest thing you could do, I'm going to do this really lazy style, but the easiest thing you could do is just, let me see, I'm just going to hide this. And if we were to render this now, a second to finish. Okay, so we have this. If I just save this out, and let's call this bars, the workaround would be, oh, actually, that is correct right there, what I just did. But the other part of that is now we have to render it like this as well. Just another pass that is what's behind the bars. So now we would come over here, save image, call this no bars, right? So now we come over here. So the correct workaround would be this. Bars and no bars. You could do this, right? So you see everything is in focus there nicely. Out of focus, I mean nicely. Then we would have our bars over here. On a separate layer, And you could do a Z defocus on that, but considering it's all basically on the same focal plane, I'm just going to add a simple defocus, which would just defocus everything uniformly on that layer. And then when I do this,
you're seeing through it properly.
I'm seeing through it, and it looks pretty much like that. You can see this one's actually noisier, but you could see it looks the same. This one actually looks like it's even more out of focus. So it's fine. I could just come over here and set this to 100 and this to 50. Right, and you can see when I push it that far, this starts introducing some issues as well. Let's just say around that seemed to work pretty nicely. Okay, so now you can see the bars are gone. So that would be the workaround. You're like, oh, okay, so now all I got to do is in Unreal, if I have something really close to the camera, just render it separately and then comp it back on, no problem. So you would think that, okay, so a great tool for that would be the Unreal render layers, right? So you could render foreground and background or multiple layers. That's when I heard that there was layers, I'm like, oh, great, this is super easy. Then we just throw the foreground on a layer, kick it off there, boom, it's all good. And it's not.
That's not how it works.
Doesn't work at all. So Tran will show the issues with this, and this is kind of super silly, actually, the way this works.
Yeah. So like if you look at the documents from Unreal documentation, I have it open here. They call it stencil layers, right? And if you set it up according to how they have this done, you basically get these black mats. So
it's rendering everything separately now.
Yeah, so it's removing
layers.
It's removing the foreground stuff. So the original render looks like this, right? So you have like these chrome pieces like that, and its way of separating it is creating black holes.
So so the problem, just so that it's clear. So if you were to render that with a black hole, the parts that become see-through, remember the whole reason why this one here works. Let me take over this for 1 second. The whole reason why this works is because now we have two layers. We have this layer and we have this layer. So when this goes out of focus and it becomes see-through, that's fine because it's showing you the layer below it.
Yeah.
However, if this layer below it had a cutout of the cage underneath it, it would just look.
Well, like, you just have black.
You would just have black there.
Yeah, like if you.
Well, it would. Yeah, it would try to defocus that still, though. No, it wouldn't because you're doing the depth of field in Unreal. But so you would have the black bars still.
Well, if you go with the passes, like for example here, when the stem becomes very thin, you see the sky behind it. You're seeing through the stem. So here, if you try to do your own defocus, you just have black, which is worse, I think, in my opinion.
Worse.
Because what you want is to see the background just without it, not with the black hole, right? Because now you would just see this black. So their sensor layer doesn't work for us, basically. Yeah. So we had to kind of figure out what to do on our own. So you can see here, like what it does if you do the stencil layer is you get a pass. Your background would be this with the black holes, and then it will spit out the pieces separately. But it doesn't really work for us.
What's really weird about this is when I first figured out that it all renders it like this and it makes black holes, I thought, oh, okay, it's because it's all rendering it as a single pass, whatever. But apparently this takes. It's almost rendering it each time separately. So the render time is double or triple or whatever. Like the render time is actually increased significantly when you do render layers.
Because it's rendering it. So here, this one, there's 3 separate elements.
But it's rendering it 3 times. And it's like, I don't know why they did it this way. This makes no sense at all that they would make a black hole.
Yeah, because then you would have just black.
you would have a black hole for the branch anyway.
Yeah.
So the only thing that I could think of that you would use that method for is like, and they kind of show that in their, William Foucher does a demo video on this. William Foucher's videos are amazing, but he does one where he puts like text behind it or like a font, and I'm like, that's cool, but I don't usually put fonts behind, like it's not that big of a thing. So I truly don't understand.
Well, I mean, like in here, it's like, oh, you can color correct. So if you look at the explanation here, look at the original image, right? Say, for example, this is kind of like some light gold color. And with the render passes, you could change the color to like blue or something like that. But it's, you want more than just to change the color or something, right?
Yeah.
So like this doesn't solve, ultimately it doesn't solve our problem using that. So we had to kind of come up with our own way of doing this.
Which is not it's not like we're gonna give you a genius
yeah, we're very
workflow.
simple.
It's very simple what we ended up doing.
Yeah.
You want to show it?
So what we ended up doing is I duplicated my sequences. So I have my sequence that's like this. And I'll have one where it's rendering normally. Okay, so you probably want to load some of the images. And I will actually hide the foreground that has the element. And then my render pass will render it without it, right? So now I'll have a clean background. And then what I'll do on the duplicate one, it's just loading. It takes a second while that loads. And I will show, let's say, a frame in Photoshop. Let's jump over here. Whoa. And then I'll have a pass here that will have no motion blur. So in my duplicate one, it will show it again. And what I do that's different in this one is I turn off a couple of settings. So the sequence still looks like out of focus when I look at it in Unreal. But the pass, when it actually renders, will look like this. So everything here, what's happening is all my effects are disabled. Everything is completely in focus. And it has no motion blur. So I'm doing two things. I am, one, turning off motion blur, and two, disabling these effects. So the first thing I do to disable motion blur is I do it in the post-process. So here I have my post-process selected. And again, it's not going to update in my viewport, but when it spits out the render, my result will be like this, right? Which looks very ugly. All you have to do in your post-process is search up motion. And under motion blur, you have amount and max. And I've set these to 0. And I keyframe them in here. So it only is in my sequence in the shot. It doesn't affect the rest of my other sequences. And then when I render, I have a special configuration set up here. That remembers the setting to turn off the effects. So one, under deferred rendering, I check on disable multi-sample effects, which again gets rid of the whole effects of things being blurry.
Depth of field, motion blur.
Yes, so it disables all that stuff. And then two, I also turn on object IDs, right? So Miguel can control this. So no motion blur, no depth of field. And then I hit render, and then I produce a pass like this. And then Miguel, you can show what it looks like in Nuke.
Yeah.
So two things, disabling motion blur in post-process.
Wait, so I already took over the screen.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to?
No, just reminding.
Okay.
And then second, turning off the effects in the render settings.
Yeah. So, all right. So let me set this to full screen. So, all right. So here we have our two passes. So you can see this one has the multi-sample effects turned off, and this one just has the clean background. Not unlike basically this here, but this one, you can see we only rendered the cage. This one has everything on it. You can see all the depth of field is gone, so it just looks hideous, right? But that's okay. That's actually what we want. So what I'm going to do is this. I will come over here, and I'm going to go to Keyer, and I'll go to Cryptomat, and I'll go to my picker, and I'm going to select this foreground piece. I believe that's it, right? It's just that one.
Yeah, it's only one piece.
Okay, so that now has selected this object, and if I go over here to my top and I go to alpha, you can see that it has now isolated this object and the alpha. Okay, so that's great. So now I could just come over here and go to channel copy and say, hey, I want you to be the alpha for this here by itself. I could go to merge pre-multiply. And now you could see that it gets rid of everything except for the stuff that was selected in the Cryptomat. Okay, so pre-multiply, all it basically does is it goes, hey, look at the alpha. Whatever is selected, keep it. Whatever is not selected, black, get rid of it, right? So now we have that. So now I could grab this and throw this on top of this guy. Okay. I could do a Z depth defocus, but I probably don't need it. I'm just going to keep it pretty simple. Just go to filter defocus and then bring up the defocus slider.
And that's only defocusing that branch.
It's only defocusing the branch. Now I could add a grade node right after the pre-multiply just to bring down the shadows a little bit or the highlights and keep it a little bit more in high. I actually like that highlight because it separates it from the hair.
Yeah, I thought so too.
So maybe like that. And I could control how much defocus I want. Maybe like this.
Yes, and then you get the same effect that you see in photography where you see through it.
And now you can see, you see through the hair perfectly rather than trying to pull up the messed up one.
Rather than this one.
So again, look at that ugly.
Yeah, and you know, it actually looks worse once it renders. So however bad it looks here, it looks way worse.
Yeah. So let's go to like the one where she actually turns around. Okay, so you can see here, really nice, really pretty depth of field. And that's how we've been doing all of this stuff. So if I open up another one, for example, let's see, let me open up.
So we're going back into like select shots where we wanted this effect and we didn't do it. And it wasn't our priority, right? So priority was like just getting most of our shots done. And then we save this to the end. So we're going back and, I'm going back and doing this in a few shots that we really wanted this look on. It's not extremely hard to do, but it is an extra step that takes more time. And we try to minimize the number of steps because there's just two of us.
Yeah, so you can see here, we see the same problem. So this is our render with everything together. Look how weird that looks.
Yeah. It looks really bad once it starts moving. It looks even worse.
Because it pops.
Yes. Yeah,
See?
like
It's
that
very ugly.
is super ugly.
So render that separately, cryptomat it, put it back in. I added a grade here to just darken it a little bit. Pre-multiply it, defocus it, grab your original render. Well, not your original render, sorry. Your background without the foreground element. And then just merge them back together. So you compare that to that.
Much nicer. It's more photographic.
Okay. If you want it to be darker here, you can always just go to that multiply, darken it. So you have that control. Right. But again, because it's thin, as we saw with the physical camera in Maya, it does become see-through. So anyway, that's dealing with very thin objects. I don't think there is a setting that you could really increase to completely fix that. I think you have to render it that way from the tests we've done. And I mean, we're really pushing the depth of field, and maybe it's not so noticeable if you keep the depth of field more subtle. But one of the stylistic choices that we're doing is trying to make everything have a very shallow, super shallow depth of field, almost making it feel slightly miniature. But if you push the depth of field like these here, you will have that issue. And you're going to have that issue, like I said, in Unreal. You're going to have that issue in Nuke. You're going to have that issue in any post depth of field that uses Z depth, because it doesn't know what is behind an occluded object that you're trying to make be completely out of focus. Okay. So yeah, that's that. Does anybody have any questions on that? No? It works good. The cool thing is this is the first time I'm actually seeing this shot, so let me actually take a look at it and see. And it's kind of weird seeing it without, we have a nice framing and the grain and all that stuff, but
Yeah.
That makes a big part of the look that we actually go for, but I just want to see how it looks. So another thing that we added to this shot in particular, this is the first time she hears of the voice in the hollow. Ta-da. And that's so we have like wind kicking in a couple frames, and that's what causes her to turn around. So let me just take a look and see how that looks. So the wind is all done on the trees and the plants via, what is it, Tran? Vector.
Oh, I guess it's a vertex animation.
Vertex animation.
Yeah.
And then the cloth sim in Marvelous to get the wind. So you could see it's still loading up. You can see the shirt is starting to flap. And you'll start seeing that some of the branches start to move around.
I should shot model that necklace.
To get rid of that hard.
Oh, just that stretch. I just need the alembic, but I can see it when it's going real slow, like the neck beads are stretching.
Let's take a look here.
Yeah, I'm actually really curious to see how the shot looks, because when you're looking at it on Unreal, it's just really hard to judge it because, well, it just doesn't look like that. It just looks very weird because you have like these strange artifacts that look like super messed up. So we don't really know. I mean, I don't know what it looks like until Miguel comps it.
This shot has probably been on this stream more than any other shot.
Oh yes, because this is one of our first shots that we were trying to do, and it went through many ugly phases.
Many.
Some phases are just like, whoa, that's so ugly. And we show that process.
Oh, the other thing that happened this week is we announced the release date for this whole project, which is November 17th, and they're having a live event at Gnomon.
So we're going to do a premiere where we will show the short on the 17th.
Yes.
And we will also do a consolidated proper presentation, making of basically all our information compressed into like
2 hours.
2 hours.
So if you don't want to watch the 100 hours, you can watch the 2-hour version. So you can see like the little tassels. Are they called tassels or tassels, right?
I don't know.
Things,
the little
whatever.
flappy thingies.
Little flappy thing is you can see that you can feel the wind on the shirt. I barely feel the branches
Moving. It's because the camera is also moving.
Yeah. That's okay. So anyway, it's almost unloading, but you can see very cool to have this kind of proper depth without having the ugly artifacts. That's how you have to do it. I hope Unreal.
Like someone put the link for the RSVP.
Yes.
Very nice. Thank you.
That. Well, I don't know if anyone's going to copy and paste or type that, but yeah.
No one's going to type that.
Yeah.
But you can, if you're in the chat, you can see the link and copy and paste it.
Yes. Yes. So yes. So you can see nice clean depth of field in the foreground. I actually feel that we could probably put smaller thin ones in the bottom here. I know that it's going to be cropped out, but only the real fans will type it out. Yes. Whoever types that out gets a free T-shirt. They do have. Gnomon will be passing out T-shirts and posters, and our poster's pretty epic looking. So
our poster's super epic looking. Make it. We had an artist that we really respect and admire make the poster for us.
Yeah. So they are going to have copies of this poster to give out at the event. Decent sized poster too. So yeah, and it'll be just like this, no weird stuff around it. So yeah. All right.
If you don't see the link, someone says they don't see the link in the chat, you could probably Google it.
If you just go to the Gnomon website, you'll see it. Just put Gnomon events, or it's all over the Gnomon Facebook page, so you could see it there as well. But yeah, they're passing out T-shirts. T-shirts are really cool as well. They have the cool logo with the mask on it and the posters.
I'll paste I don't know if this link shows up, but I just pasted one. And if not, if it's not showing up, you can just Google it like Miguel said.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on. So I'm going to close this. I hope this was helpful, the depth of field stuff. This is very abbreviated. Like I usually spend an entire 3 hours going through all the little things inside of V-Ray for depth of field. But that's an abbreviated version. So, all right. So we also started working on another shot. Let me just pull it up, and then we'll go through the whole process.
Yeah. The shot is very heavy for me to render on my computer.
Just give me 1 second. I'll pull this up. I have to close Premiere if I have anything else open because it just bogs down.
Yeah, Premiere is like heavy.
I mean, it's 10 minutes worth of 4K footage, so I guess it's...
Yeah, but it's heavy for me when I just have nothing. So
I
look at my shots through Premiere. I don't have I'm not loading the edit. I'm just looking at that one render, and I can't have that open at the same time as Unreal.
All right, so let's take a look at this. So, let's just let this load up, and it'll show you the shot we've been working on this week. So we've shown this in previous streams, but the shot wasn't finished.
And it's probably gonna
look choppy. Yeah.
It's gonna look choppy because it's not, streaming.
So that's it right there. So it's that
it's
intro
super choppy.
shot. It's super choppy.
Yeah, I think I can. Yeah, you can scrub through it. I think the scrubbing works.
You can see we just wanted a shot that has that old school kind of Technicolor. Well, the whole aesthetic of this is like 1960s, 1970s color palette, and the grindhouse grain and all that, like 16 millimeter. So we wanted it to feel like it's older, and that's down to like back when they used to say color provided by, and you would see like Technicolor. So we just provided color provided by Unreal Engine 5. The way that the date was written in the older movies is always with Roman numerals. So we wanted that. We wanted to start establishing like there's a bigger village, and then cut right to the chase sequence. So this was, from an assembly point of view, the foreground was actually very easy to do because we had every single one of these assets built for our village sequence.
Yeah, so this was like nothing.
It was nothing. It was like
compared to, so we just reused some of our pieces from another shot.
It's such a joy to build things this way because you're just like, let's grab all this, shove them together. It's lighting in real time. Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
We
saved this shot for the end. I was like definitely not ready for this type of shot when we first started the stream. It took me this whole process to be comfortable trying to tackle this. At least that's how I felt.
Tag team this one, so
yeah, we did it together. So that's how most of our shots are.
Yeah,
basically. Miguel does all the framing for everything and composition.
And then I get lazy and I go, here, you make it better.
Yes, I kind of get annoyed, but it works best because I think the framing is super important, and Miguel's framing is always really fantastic. Like I don't think of some of these things. Like I just thought of it like aerial shot, and then Miguel was like, well, let's put some foreground stuff, and I really like that, all that. It makes so much sense, and you're also managing to tell the story a little bit in the beginning too.
So what we're gonna have is this chase starts with the sound of a trumpet. That trumpet plays a war horn, plays a big role in the entire thing. So it's literally the first thing you kind of hear, or not the first thing, but that right there. So we want to have the guy up here. So we're going to record the motion capture for that. That's like, again, it's one of those things that if they pull this from us right now, it's not going to change the story, but we just want the guy there. We wish we had more time to have like people walking around and the kid running and, someone going up the stairs, but that's hard to mocap with the mocap system that we have. Doing stuff like stairs or ladders, because it's not going to line up with the actual ladder that we have here. So, but whatever. So we're just going to put the guy there blowing the horn. We already have the horn built and everything, and the guy to put in there. So, all right. So let's talk about how we did this shot. So we'll start at the very beginning. So let me open up GAEA, and we've already talked about GAEA, but we'll talk about some of the texturing stuff in GAEA. I've found that using GAEA for just modeling stuff tends to be pretty easy. It gets complicated when you start getting into the texturing side of things. That's where I struggled the most. I found texturing much easier in World Machine, But I recently was like, oh, I think I figured out how to finally get this thing to look okay in GAEA. So I'll show you guys the workaround for that. So let me close this for now. So foreground stuff. Foreground stuff. Let's just close that. And let's see, let's try to open it one more time. Oh, well, while it loads, I'll show you a few other things that we did here. So this shot, we re-rendered all of these shots here.
Ni mawindo yangu, ulichelewa tena. Hebu nionyeshe.
So we kind of wanted, again, to go with that old school spaghetti Western aesthetic where they would put letters like this, like the good, the bad, and the ugly. So that way you just know the characters' names right away. Like, let's not even be subtle with it. Boom, Koa, Allah, you know. And these two shots are the two shots that basically show you the character's personality in a single shot. You know, this one is always down and defeated, right? And then this other one is arrogant and obnoxious. So we re-rendered all of that, relit it. I think it looks much better, much less muddy.
Yeah, we went back to some of our earlier shots and thought some of the lighting was muddy. And so we just fixed up that stuff.
Yeah. So here are the foreground branches. You can see they all look really nice now. It's not all weird. Here's another one where you'll see that issue. It's stuff that you won't notice it on the first one. So we are going to add more branches in the foreground here. But here, these branches on the right-hand side were a nightmare. And then once we rendered it the way I showed you guys and comped it in Nuke, it all worked together perfectly. There's no weird artifacts there now. So, all right. So let's see if GAEA opened up yet, and it has not opened up.
That's funny because you had it open before we started
the
stream.
Of course. That's how it always is.
I mean, I could show some.
Yeah, show something.
So I'll show some stuff while he's troubleshooting. I do not know how to take the camera back.
I'll take it. You got it.
I don't know why my screen is not popping up.
Your screen is up.
Is it? Oh, it is up. Haha. Okay, so here's the shot. And I will play it, and it will play very, 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 very slow because the scene is very heavy for multiple reasons. But maybe it's good it plays slow. So then that way you can actually see it because of the whole streaming and how JPEG it could look. So here, this scene is pretty heavy. Some of it is from stupid reasons for myself and the vegetation. I ended up having issues scattering some of the trees in the background using the landscape tool. The leaves would disappear, and I just kind of probably could have fixed it. I just gave up because I think the fix involved a couple things like LODs. These trees, when I brought them in, all this in here, I was never planning to do a very wide shot with it. They were speed tree trees and they don't have LODs. And I think that's part of the problem. So I ended up manually just laying it out, and I kind of wanted to manually lay it out anyway, because then I could art direct some of the shapes. I know it just looks like green, but it was actually very carefully placed.
And we did try doing it with the foliage paint And yeah, it was just a nightmare.
Yeah, so the leaves would disappear when you get too far away with the foliage one. If I manually placed them, they didn't, and then it was just kind of hard to direct it. You know, it's probably on my part. I'll just turn off these trees here, on my part or my lack of skills.
Well, what it is the trees are very high poly, and when you try to cover up an area that big, it got really heavy really fast. So then it immediately triggers like a culling thing where it cuts out the polygons. So all of a sudden, all the foliage was gone, and you would just see like uh, just the trunks and the
Yeah,
branches.
and
So then you would have to run a command that would force the foliage to show everything, and then it would just completely bog the computer down.
I don't. These trees don't have LODs,
Yeah.
but that is part of the reason
The correct method would have been
to
create
actually
multiple
create it.
LODs. Yeah.
And I didn't want to really do that. So, because we're out of time. So I just manually placed everything. And it's fine. It didn't really take longer. It just makes the scene slower, but it didn't actually slow me down. I felt maybe, you know, I can turn it off and on, which is really nice. This the other thing that makes it heavy when I replicate it is we're still using 5.03 or something like that, and none of the leaves are actually nanite. So you actually feel like, oh, this is slow. So, you know, our mesh is really dense. All our rocks are really dense. And we have fine performance because of nanite. And our leaves do not have that, which I read about 5.1 supporting nanite on foliage now. So on our next project, when we upgrade, it should be faster. So anyway, so this is like, let me go through some of the stages. So I've hidden all the trees so you can see it's empty. I'll show you what the shot looks like. And I'm hiding all the smoke effects right now. And let's hide.
So yeah, they're asking if you used LODs on trees. So no.
Yeah.
We did not. That's why we had issues. I think I have to restart my computer. So
if you restart, I'm going to disappear.
Oh, okay. So then I'm not going to be able to show GAEA then. Okay, that's fine. Just keep going.
Really? Okay. That sucks. I'll
keep trying.
Yeah, keep trying. That sucks big time. But anyway, so I've hidden all my stuff here. Everything is really fast now. And I'll show you some of the parts. So let's hide some of that. I'll hide the fire pole. Let's hide more of the fog. And one of the things I did here is I have a folder called Light Leak Fix. Okay. So this is pretty stripped down. So you can just see how this looks. These meshes are in the foreground here are all from Megascans, right? And Miguel actually, what he's trying to show you is how he actually made this big landscape here in the background. So all this was created in GAEA, which is not loading up on his end. And then he actually did all the texturing on the surface through GAEA here. These little pieces here, these parts here that you see being selected, or just little pieces I added on top afterward. If you also look over here, you can see there's a lot of light leaks. All this like white artifact, they're light leaks. They're not the sun hitting it and it's picking up on the top surface. It's actually light coming from behind it that is leaking through the geometry, right? And they look very, very ugly. And they really annoy me. They look harsh and they look like a bunch of holes in your mesh. The reason why we have this is because of nanite, and we turn off double-sided shadowing on geometry, right? So since it's not double-sided, light is leaking through, and this is just kind of a workaround with some of the nanite stuff. If you keep it on, you get a lot of black, dirty artifacts. And which is to me worse. So the way I get around all these light leaks on backlit shot is just really dirty. I just take geometry. So I grab this rock and kind of just placed it all over the areas where the light leaks really bothered me. And that just covered it up. So very simple way to tackle that issue. Originally, I tried to be like smarter about it. Maybe there's a different ways to work around it, and none of them worked out. It just made everything worse. And so then I have that covered here. And then I start laying out some village elements here. Right. So again, this were stuff that we built earlier on. And then we have some fake water. So I have some fake water planes here.
And they're super simple. It's just it's a default what is it? The starter content water. I just adjusted the shader.
Yeah, and it works fine for far away.
Yeah.
You know, especially once we start adding all these other elements on top. Then we start laying out these trees. So we have these extra tall trees, which I'm probably gonna mispronounce it. They're like baobab trees, right? So they're based on trees in real life in Africa. And then here, these are little trees that I manually place, which now my scene is going to start slowing down because again, they're not nanite. Here, I placed a tree in the foreground because I thought it looked nice. And let me turn on some of the smoke effects. So I have some fog cards here. I don't have that many. You can see them highlighted. And then I have some Niagara smoke effects that I bought from the marketplace that worked out pretty well. There is actually a fake waterfall back here, but it's actually kind of hidden.
It's kind of crappy.
Yeah, it's actually kind of crappy. So I kind of hit it with a tree right here. It's actually back here. Let's see if I can hide the smoke. So you can see it right here. It kind of works, but I decided let's just cover it up. And then the thing that I have here, let's turn on all this other stuff. So I have this little fire pole, this big tree foreground. I added some decals here, which you don't really see. So I was trying to color the planes more blue. So our ground is like red with like blue streaks, very stylized choice. At this distance, you can't tell, but I have it. And the last element I have here are two things. So I got some Niagara birds from the marketplace, and you can see in the distance they're kind of flying out, and they're really far, but it's just to give some life to the shot. I had some issues with that one, which happens. Sometimes you buy things in the marketplace, they work really well, and sometimes you have to tweak it. Like the birds were like flying into the ground when so there's all kinds of issues troubleshooting that. And then the other thing I have are these clouds. So these clouds, I was looking at a way to place some clouds in the background. So let me hide it so you can see. Right, so you can see these clouds cutting through, and they actually have volume. I did not make these. I actually got this searching around. So I thought about doing cards. I searched in the marketplace for individual clouds. And the thing about these here, let me hide all this stuff because my scene is too slow and I can't move anything. Okay, here we are. So the thing about these clouds is they're actually movable and I can manually place them. They're super awesome. There is a limitation on this here where I can only have 3. So I have 3 movable clouds and I got them from, let me pull up the page. give me 1 second. I actually ended up going on YouTube looking for different things in the marketplace. And this is a project by Jason Key. And he just made this available for anyone to download, where he shows these blueprints of these volumetric clouds, and you can see how dynamic it is with the light. If I'll post the link of this YouTube video, in that link, you can actually find the project that he generously gave for people to use. So I purchased that, or not purchased that, I downloaded that, and then I just placed them in my scene. There were other things I was looking at, like sky systems and all that stuff, but I just really wanted that volume. I thought it looked very nice. I probably could have gotten away with just a card at this distance, but it's just nice to have it and try it out. And that is the shot here. And well, actually, I didn't go over the lighting. Let me just hide the stuff that makes it slow, which are the trees. So my lighting is pretty simple. I have a directional light, fog, H-dry, and then post-process. So I'll turn off these here. Just turn off my directional light and my fog and post-process. So here I just have my H-dry, so you can see what the lighting looks like. It looks really flat, almost looks like it's not lit, right? But to me, that looks good. And I have my directional light on, and then my fog. So my fog does a lot of work for me, as you can see. It makes it feel much more natural. And then my post-process, which just brings it down and punches the color a little bit. I tend to light a little bit brighter. I feel like it, I get more light in my shadows. But actually here, I actually have 2 fill lights in here. So I have 2 extra lights that are filling in the shadows here. So you can see that first one. It's not, the way I lit this is, let's turn it on and off. It's not meant to feel like a light is actually shining on top of it. I'm trying to fake a feel as if it was like GI bouncing around, right? So what I do with that is I end up, when I'm using this technique a lot, it's just, I don't know if it's the best technique or whatever. It works on an artistic level, so it could be technically incorrect. But I use a spotlight and I soften my shadows. And the big thing that I do is I turn my specular really low. Because if my specular is really bright, so let's set that to 1, it actually seems fine. But sometimes if my specular is really bright, it picks up highlights, and you wouldn't really expect the shadows on the highlights. It looks more like a flashlight hitting the surface. So I do that with all my fill effects. And you can see I have it right here on this mountain shape. Let's see if there's questions. Let's see. Well, that's so beautiful. Did you use the quantum clouds pack or volumetric clouds in the background? They're all, I don't know what the quantum clouds pack is, but maybe I answered your question right. I just got these from Jason Key project, and I migrated over, and they are blueprints. So you can look more into them. I think that they were clouds originally created in Embergen, and then went through a process and turned into a blueprint. Okay. So Miguel, how's not working?
No, it's just not loading. So I may have to restart.
Which is going to take a second.
It'll take a second. So just give me 1 second. So you might want to. Yeah, so we'll be back in 1 second.
Yeah,
Tran
so
will
just
be-
take a little 30-second break, and there will be no sound. We'll be back.
I'm not sure why. Okay. So we're back. So thank you, James, for that. Just give me a second. I'm trying to open up GAEA. Which I kid you not, we had we have never had an issue opening GAEA ever,
Yeah,
except for right now.
yeah. Now I was like, make sure GAEA works. And he's like, yep. And he had it open.
I had it open 2 seconds ago. So I guess, does anybody have any questions for us while
Is it loading?
it's doing exactly what it did before? So
I had a problem with my computer when it updated. I don't know if your computer updated, but it was a sound process that makes certain things not load.
yeah, I'm not gonna figure that out right now. Do you know how to do that?
Services.
What is it?
Starts with N. You don't have that service.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah. Yeah, sorry guys, we're just trying to get this program to load. It just does not want to load for some weird reason.
I definitely had that a problem like that yesterday where things just not.
Yeah, what's weird is you would think that, okay, now I've restarted the entire computer.
Well, someone said, hey, you can try resetting the settings via Quad Spinner Watson. But it's not even loading at all. Right? Let me show some stuff here. Give me 1 second. Let me load some projects. Let me load Premiere, which is kind of scary. It's like it's scared. Because it usually will tank everything. So in a moment, we'll see a couple of things.
So I'm gonna try that, Dax. So thanks. That's a good.
And I am trying to load on the map, which will take a moment.
It's a CG, guys. This is how it is.
Yes, it's just how it is. Like with everything, there is no software that is ever perfect, ever, or that never crashes or never stops working. So there's always little issues like this. Let me have Premiere. Let me try to load the shots, which I'm kind of afraid of doing. Okay. Let me minimize this. And let me show you some of the other things that I've been relighting.
All I know is the minute you open up a new map, this thing's gonna work.
Oh, that's great.
No, it's not. It hasn't worked yet. I'm just saying.
No, I'm just saying that would be great.
Yeah.
So I kind of went back and relit some shots. So like here, this is what this shot looked like originally. Let's play it. And it looks all right. I don't know, it's not the worst, but there's a lot of things I don't like about it, even when I was working on it and I didn't really know how to go about it. So early on, if you've been following the stream, I talk a lot about how I have problems backlighting. And then, you know, keep in mind things that I say are problems for me. It doesn't mean that they're problems for anyone else. Just things that I'm trying to get through artistically. So because I had issues backlighting, I decided front lighting would look better. So you can see that her plane on the face is being lit here. But I really wanted this shot to be more backlit. I think it would have been a little bit prettier. The other issue I have is the shadows are like really, really black. So I was getting a lot of flat black shadows, and I don't dislike things going to black. Like actually, a lot of the stuff that Miguel and I do gets really, really dark and our shadows are super, super black. But there's something about the way it's falling off on the form that we don't really like. It doesn't make sense for it to be this black. Normally our shadows only get this crushed if our scene is very dark. So it could be an interior shot or a nighttime shot with just a light hitting a person's face, and then it makes sense for the shadow to go extremely black, and then it looks awesome. But here, this is daytime, so why do we have super black shadows? The second thing I don't like is just the transition. It feels really hard, right? It's not really a soft turn of the form. So when we used to do all our shots in V-Ray before, I didn't really have to think about it because that stuff would just happen naturally, and I would get this nice soft turning on the form, and I wouldn't have these really harsh shadows. So if you look everywhere, they're really hard. And then the light would just fill in naturally for me, and I never had to think about trying to create that look manually myself, right? I think Unreal can do anything. I just think that it's in, how does it behave in the hands of an artist, and I was not used to it. So eventually over time, of course, towards the end of the project, I started feeling more comfortable with it. So here you can see the shot relit. And to me, I think it looks much better. So let me play the other one. So maybe you can judge yourself. I can't do split screen. I don't really use Premiere. We use it for editing. So here it's less dynamic and the shadows are harsher. And I think this one looks a lot nicer. So let's go back to the early frames, like maybe this one here. So this one, when I relit it, I said, look, I'm going to backlight it. I started understanding this at the very end of the project, which is a little bit ironic. So she's getting lit, and this is actually being lit from behind, from the sun, right? And if you scrub through, you can see that. And what I did with the shadows is I just started filling them in with actual spotlights myself. So if I come in here, let me minimize this.
Do you want to answer that question? Do you use color correction in Unreal? Yes, we do.
Yeah, we use color correction Unreal. I use the post-process a lot. We'll probably change how we approach some of these things on our next project. Normally, we just render raw renders, and Miguel does all the color correction outside of whatever. But on this process, it was very new for us, and the post-process was used a lot, which I think you can't avoid it. You do have to use the post-process, which is something that never exists in our pipeline. So just give it a second. It's actually trying to load that sequence. And then you can see the shot. So it's kind of funny. Miguel's computer goes down and all my stuff is taking very long to load. Okay, so we have the shot here. I will split the screen. Once I leave the shot, everything looks very ugly outside. Let's see where she's at. Click the tree. Here we are. Okay. And I'll turn the light here. The moment we're out of camera, you can see how gross my environment looks. I have a lot of little lights, which I'm really not used to having. So here, let me expand this so I can disable this. This is one of my fill lights. You can see in the color on it here that it's blue. Like Unreal will actually tint your icon the color, which is really neat. So if I turn that off, you can see it gets really dark. And then over here, I have another fill light. So I have one underneath that is red. That's pink. You can see the color right here. And the top one is blue because that's supposed to be the sky. So I think that there would be bounce with this much red. Would it be physically like that? I don't know. It just works visually. So it's completely an artistic choice. Right. And I have a few of these because what she does is she runs through. Oops. Let's come back here. She runs through the terrain. Right. And you can see the lights are kind of being animated. The lights are being animated and moving with it. If you're looking carefully at the icons. And let's go back to that frame here. And then I have this light on top, which I just disabled that, right? So basically one light that acts like the light source. Now, I did kind of lit this to go into shadow on purpose. That way I can just control the key light. I also, in my scene here, if you look at my outliner, let me collapse this. It's super disorganized. I tried to be organized in the beginning, and then towards the end of the project, it just turns to a mess. Let's turn off the directional light. It's not really doing much. It's kind of just filling in my environment. Let's turn off my fog, and then you can see my HDRI. So to me, my lighting, it's all in shadow. I have a fake kind of sunlight here. And what I've done with my fake sunlight is I try to get shadows from the leaves. Like I want it to feel like we're feeling the sense of cast shadows. And I've also softened the shadows. So if I go to default, it's really, really sharp. I don't know if you can tell through the streaming, but it looks very strange. So I'm looking at these shadow shapes and it looks odd. Let's see if I can undo.
This is all working now, just so you know.
Okay. So once I soften the shadows, it looks more natural. I'll just wrap this up so you can show some of that stuff. And then once I have that, I'll fill in my shadows here with that blue light and then my red light. So it looks a lot prettier. And then I feel like the light turns on the form. It's also not flat black like I'm showing you in the original one. Right. Again, that looks very ugly to me, and super sharp transition between the form and light, and it goes completely black. Here it turns more and we have a lot more fill, right? And the forms feel nicer. I never really think about forms and lighting before, but now I do. The second thing I did is I added, I tried to hit the camera with this light right here. So the only purpose of this light really gives me is it gives me a slight extra rim light, but mainly what I'm using it for is to get the lens flare. So once she comes out, so basically she's running under the trees and she comes out from under, and as soon as she does that, you see that there is a nice little glare that you might expect, but it's completely contrived. If you're looking at over here, it's just being driven by that light. And then that is also being animated because if I don't animate it along with the shot, she just leaves the lens flare, right? So that's moving along and we're getting kind of this dirty look. I didn't want an overly strong lens flare. Let's go here. I just want it to feel kind of dirty. So now when we're playing the shot, it just feels like, I don't know, better. I think, I don't know what the word is for that. But that's it. If you want to show
better.
It's more better.
More better.
More better. It feels more like natural. It feels less CG, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll share this. Okay, so first of all, definitely thanks to Dax. That wasn't the solution or fully the solution. I think it was a part of it, but I had to do that So reset all the settings, but also I had to run it as administrator, and that seemed to fix it. So I'd never had to run it as an administrator ever before, but for today during the stream,
you have to.
Yeah, it wanted to try to make me look foolish, so it succeeded. So, all right, so here's the terrain before we added all the plants and whatever. And the obvious thing is the colors are really wonky because our world is kind of reddish and with blue teal. So I knew that I had to go very saturated and red to begin with, and I just wanted to have like some areas that looked more real, like the sand and whatever. But you could see we have like areas of teal and a lot of red, which is the aesthetic of
our world. And
so so we have this here. So how do I go about texturing this guy? So I'm going to bring this up over here. And building the terrain itself is just pretty straightforward. Like if I were to come down here and just go to, that's what's great about this. You can kind of make something awesome in a couple of seconds. I'm going to set this to something lower, like 1K for now. I think the fact that I have all those nodes is going to try to recreate all of them. But we're just going to build something from scratch down here. But I just want to have those nodes up on the top for reference. So so we'll just build something super simple using just some of the geo primitives. Like I could just use like the badlands and a mountain. We'll keep something super, super simple for now. Just give it a second. So you can see we have something like this. And again, I don't want to get into the terrain generation because it's so simple. So we'll do something real basic like this. Maybe I'll bring up the scale a little bit on the sky, which kind of flattens it out a little bit, which is what I want. I could grab a mountain. Okay. And I'll just middle mouse drag that guy, or just drag him into that. I'll set this to add. Bring up the blend amount. Okay, so we have like this one mountain in the middle. I might want to offset it, so let's go to our transform. We'll throw this guy in there. Let's just position him off to the side here.
it's really nice, like the whole node graph.
Oh yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, it's actually so incredible. Like imagine having this like 10 years ago.
We were working on 4, we would have killed for this thing.
Yeah, like those things back then
It was a nightmare. Someone had to go in and hand sculpt everything.
Yeah.
So all right, so again, I don't want to make this about the texture, the modeling process, because it's pretty simple. But you could see in just a couple of minutes we're able to get something that looks great. Maybe I'll grab let's see. I like the let's see what else I could put in here to make it look cooler.
It does have like a nice terrain. Like sometimes like there's other procedural map or terrain makers, and they tend to be kind of like pointy, right?
Yeah,
like
World Machine stuff tends to all look
pointy.
the same.
Yeah, they're like just do like pointy mountains. This one, like when I'm looking at it, it has like a lot of nice, flatter, more planar surfaces that look really convincing. Like the ground looks really beautiful.
I'm actually gonna just not use that. Just do this. All right, so let's just go with this. Okay, So this is how I approach the texturing on this, and there might be a bunch of different ways of doing it. But if I come down here and I go to the data nodes, there's a guy over here called texture. And I'll just plug my output connection to that. And you can see that what this thing does, which is great, is it gives you a bunch of random, not random because it's based on slope, soil, and this chaos, which just creates complexity here. So if you come from like a world machine background, a lot of this stuff is stuff that I would do it with like a bunch of purlins and whatever. But here it's kind of giving you this complexity. So the reason why this complexity is important, you can see right now it's just basically black and white, is the way this stuff textures is it essentially is like a remap value in Maya. It's looking at the values from black to white, and then it's assigning a color based on that. So if I come over here to like clutter, this kind of shows an easy way of visualizing what this does in the background. Let me just come over here and set this to pin as underlay, so it knows that that's the model that I want to use as that I'm going to texture. And you can see here, there's white up on the top and black in the bottom. Okay, so now if I select this white and I turn this red, you can see that everything that was once white is now red, and everything that is black, well, it's still black because we haven't changed that. But if we do that, you get this. Okay, so just always keep in mind white on the top, black on the bottom. And now as you go in here and add new inputs, you now know that like this, let's just say it's 50% gray. You can sculpt, yes. So someone asked if you could sculpt mountains, like if you could sculpt it, yes, you can. But that's not really what it's the best at. It's better when you just use the nodes. So now you can see 50% gray. Remember, always look at this guy here as white and black, white and black. And now if you put a new color here, 50% gray is going to be purple. If you come over here, and again, I'm not being perfectly accurate here in my selection. Now anything that is 25% or whatever, again, I'm not perfectly on 25, gets yellow, right? And now you come over here, we're closer to black. Anything that is over here is now going to get green, right? So you can see, obviously, this looks hideous.
Yeah,
but
well,
this
it's not pretty, but it still looks kind of cool.
yeah, but you can see it's looking at this map that you're giving it, and it's creating this. Now, if you just plug in one channel like this or one texture like we did here, it's going to kind of just look like what it looks like. Like, yes, it's cool. There's just a noise over everything. It doesn't necessarily feel like it's tied to the geometry that well. Like, yes, it is. The peaks are green. The valleys are more this kind of reddish color, right? But it doesn't really feel like they're gelling completely. But again, the important thing to look at here is, or to think about, is the whole concept of black and white and how it's remapping the values based off that. Okay, so what it has that's really good is this thing called sat maps, which is basically like a library of satellite maps. And you could see it is automatically, I wish that they both were going horizontal or vertical here so that you could visualize this easier. But now that image has rotated, and you can see it's doing the same thing, but it has a bunch of preset colors to pick from.
Oh, they look really cool.
They look cool. The problem with it when I first started is I don't feel like I was ever getting a lot of variation or contrast in it. It kind of felt like, considering how many colors I was getting here, I never felt like I was getting enough of it here. And that's what you'll get in particular if you just try to plug in one thing, like, the texture, plug that in, It's cool, but you're not going to get a bunch of different stuff. Okay. So what you really have to start doing is trying to get as much complexity in this black and white map that you're going to plug into this thing, into this sat map. So the first thing I want to do is, so I already created this one texture, and that's going to give us this complexity that we saw. But now I'm going to come over here and also create this effects. It's choking up here, so let's give it a second. Let's press save just in case. Restarting this is something that we might very easily do. Okay. All right. So now I have my effects here. I'm going to right click on this and go show as mask. So now I'm going to see the height of my terrain as a black and white value. Let me hide the atmospheric perspective. So you could just see now the lower areas are basically black and the peaks are white. Okay, so it's just acting as a height map. This is, we're literally seeing the displacement map directly on the model. So if I turn off pin as underlay, you could just see the displacement map applied on a plane. Okay, and I plug this into an effects node. That way I could adjust my levels, for example. I could go to shaper and pull out the values. It kind of acts like a levels a little bit. So you can see now we're getting more intensity rather than what we had before. Okay. And now what I could do is combine this guy here, which was our kind of noise, with this guy here. So you can see now this is like our merge node in Nuke, but it's called combine. One thing that is a little bit confusing is there is no like A and B that is easy to see. It's input and input 2. So input 2 is the top layer. It would be like the A to the B, except it's in the bottom rather than the top. I do wish this was the other way around, so you could think, oh, this is the layer above the other one, but it's kind of the opposite order. So that took me a little bit of time to get used to. So if I set this to like add right now and bring this up, you can see that now we're getting a lot more variation here. This is extremely, extremely sensitive. So if I plug in a sat map here, and let me just come back to this combine and set this to pin as underlay so that the texture appears on the actual model. And let's just come over here and do something like this. You could see that now it looks like the peaks are darker and there's just much more variation here. Okay, let's come over here and keep playing with this and find the color that we like. So I kind of like this one. Okay, so I'm not going to try to match exactly what I had on the other project. I'm just going to show you just in general how I would texture this. So, all right, so that I kind of like these colors. Okay, but I don't feel like I'm getting enough contrast in here. So what I might do here is plug in a color effects. And what I usually do is I'll go to the gamma first and apply gamma. And I'll bring this down a little bit. And you can see that that starts to give me much more kick. Okay. I can go to clarity. I'm going to go to equalize. And this is initially going to look terrible. Turn this on and you can see it goes insane. Okay. But if I bring this down dramatically.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
I start getting a little bit more color in there. I could go to auto levels, bring this down a little bit. I think I'm going to get rid of the equalize in this case because it's making it a little minty. And I hate mint.
You do hate mint.
I hate mint. It makes this kind of looks like mint ice cream, and mint ice cream is the worst. So I'm going to turn that off. But you can see we have a little bit more contrast now. So we go from this to this, right? So the color effects was the thing that I was missing all along. Like I kept doing this, and I was like, damn, it just looks so flat and boring. And the minute I started using the color effects, I started getting a lot more kick to it. Now, one thing that I want to do is I'm going to right click on this and pin it, and then just come back to this combine node where I combine the texture and the effects and lower this a little bit. Let's just see what happens when we don't.
So pinning it means that it's locking onto that last node.
Yeah, because in Nuke, like if I click on this and press number 1, I could come back to any of the previous nodes, double click it and adjust the attributes. In GAEA, the minute you double click on a node, that's now the one you're looking at. So if you want to see how it all looks together up to this point, but you want to adjust the settings here, if you don't pin it and you click over here, it's going to take you back to this point in the build.
Yeah, so you can't see it unless
you can't see it unless you pin it. Yeah, it's not a big deal, but it's something you have to get a little bit used to. Okay, so we have that. That's looking cool. So I'm going to leave this alone. This will be like my bottom layer. All right, cool. So I didn't do any erosions on any of this stuff, and maybe I should. So what I'm going to do, because erosion always gives me some nice stuff, but I actually kind of like the hard edges, but let's see what happens if we get an erosion in there. Actually, let's go without an erosion for now. Let's just use our flow here. So I'm going to grab this and I'm going to plug this into the flow map. I'm going to right click on this and turn off pin. That way I could actually see what this is doing. Okay. And I'm going to go, this one, you can see the quality is currently set to a quarter quality. When I set this to a higher quality, nothing happens. Some nodes have this thing here that says apply change, sorry. I always just press auto apply on them so that it updates right away. And I'm just going to go to primary. Let's do primary and secondary.
That's pretty amazing.
So I like this. Okay. So I'm going to leave this down here. Now, I'm going to come over here and let's just create another texture node. Okay, and here I'll just usually change the seed, play around with the scale, bring this down over here, press apply, or automatically apply. Just mess with this a little bit. Maybe I could try one of the other modes just to get some variation. Don't like that one. Again, I want a lot of variation, so maybe this one is good. And I'll go to my sat maps, plug that into that. Okay, and I'm going to come over here and I'll go to Sandy. Let's take a look at this color. So I want to make sure that this pops. So maybe go with a lighter color. Okay, so let's go with that. I'll go to my color effects, and if I don't have the color effects there, I'll just do this over here. So kind of same thing. So here I might increase the saturation a smidge. I might go to gamma, which is my favorite. Bring this down a little bit. I always check the equalize just to see what it does. And again, I just bring this down a little bit. So something like that. Let's compare it to this. Okay. So what I'll do here is if I drag this guy into this guy, you can see that now whatever I drag it into becomes the top layer. I'll set this just to blend, bring it up all the way. So now I completely overrode it. And now I'll grab that flow and plug that in as a mask. Okay. Sometimes you need to, you can see it's there, but it doesn't look that strong. So I might just come over here and put effects, auto level it, go to shaper, just to give it a little bit more kick. Okay, so let's pin this and let's play with some of the other blending modes. Maybe I'll go with add. Let's try subtract. I'm going to go with add, and what I'll do is I'll just bring this down a little bit. Okay.
Really adds much more detail.
Yeah. And maybe what I realize is, you know what? Let's unpin this here. Maybe what I want is that as we get down to the bottom here, that sandy color is all at the bottom here. So I'm going to just connect this to the height here. Okay. And I'll press invert down here. And I'll just play with this. Okay. So now I could say, what if this and this were together?
I like how it automatically just combines it for you.
Do that. Plug this guy into the effects. And now over here, you can see that we start getting a different color down there that we didn't have before.
Which that looks more natural. It feels like it would be like the same that's in the flow map.
Yeah, and we could bring this up if we wanted to get more complexity. So, okay, so now we have that. So now we could come over here and look at some of our other data nodes. So the data nodes are the ones that basically give you information that you could apply in different ways. So let's look at some of the other ones that we have here. So like protrusion, let's put that in there. Let's look at slope. Let's do protrusion first, and I'll just plug that in there. Let's press save. Okay, so I could bring up, I'll turn on apply changes so it does it automatically. Okay, so you can see this is pulling out all the protrusion, basically all the stuff that's coming out. Okay. All right, that's cool. Let's take a look at this over here. So there's many things you can do. You could apply that directly and just add it, or you could have that drive something else. So what I usually do is I'll put the texture node again. I like to work with masks because to me that's like the most intuitive way of working. So I'll just grab this guy over here. I'll say I want this to be very small. So let's set this to auto change. Okay, so let's get that like that. Let's crank this up. And I'm just trying to get stuff that looks cool. That's really all I'm doing. There's not much thought besides that. Just as much variation as possible. All right, so I have this. I'm going to plug this guy into a sat map and maybe go with a darker color here. You know what I'm going to do before I... actually, that's actually fine. Let's undo that. So we'll set this to something dark. Okay. Color effects. So let's try equalize first. Again, whenever I do equalize, it gets really crazy. But I'll bring that down. Bring down my gamma. So apply gamma. Let's bring up the saturation a tiny bit. Okay, let's grab our protrusion. Let's go to effects here. The reason why I'm doing effects versus color effects is for some reason when I do color effects and then plug it in as a mask, it doesn't like it. So I'll just do it as effects. Okay, let's bring up our shaper here. Let's clamp. I might not do this one. Let's try clip. I'm just trying to get that contrast back in there. Okay. So there we go.
It's a nice looking pattern.
Plug that into that. Crank it up all the way. I think this needs to be darker, so I'm going to bring down the gamma. So you can see, it's kind of hard to see, but all those areas are now darker. Now we might look at that and be like, it doesn't look the way I kind of want. So that's fine. We could come over here and be like, you know what? Let's do something like that. Let's just see what it looks like. What if we set this to add? Okay, I kind of like that better. Let's come over here. Let's take a look at this guy. And maybe what we need to do is under shaper, let's bring our whites up a little bit more.
You really have like so much control over the surface. Like when you're showing like all those masks, like just to try to get that somewhere in any texturing program, you wouldn't have it.
Yeah. So let's just take a quick look with some aerial perspective. So that's not, sometimes this thing doesn't want to update. I'm not sure why. I don't want to fight it. So anyway, you can see it's starting to look much nicer fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And we could just keep going. We could just keep adding more and more and more complexity to this. But it's basically with that method. So right now we're looking at this at 1K. So if I come over here, let's just come over here, set this to 2K. It's going to take a second because it's going to rebuild it.
It's nice you can work lower and then you can preview it higher.
Yeah.
But the streaming is usually pretty hard on graphics card, but performance is pretty good, even with the streaming and stuff, which makes it much slower.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Where it gets really slow is like what I'm doing now. Like when you jump from 1K to 2K, it like has to rebuild every single node.
And yeah, and it's 4 times larger. So
Yeah,
anytime you go from 1 to 2 or 2 to 4, you're really times 4.
yeah. So you can see you're getting a lot more
It looks
detail.
much nicer.
Yeah, it looks like substantially nicer. So there's a bunch of other things that we could do here. Like for example, I could come over here and go to, let's see, some that I like. So we could add some. Let's look at what the slope does, and we might use it. We might not use it. Let's just take a look and see. So you could see everything that is basically pointing down is getting a darker value, and everything that is pointing up is getting another color. You can control the fall off of that. So if you look at this, you could say, I could use that to darken the sides, or what we could even try to do here, I'm not sure how this is going to look, but we could just throw this on directly like this, set this to add, lower this dramatically. Maybe it's not add, maybe it's subtract. So now the tops are a little bit darker.
I think it looks really nice. Like you're just doing a demo too. So
Yeah.
And that's really fast results.
Yeah.
Usually all my demos look like crap.
Yeah.
So,
but it took me a while to get this process in GAEA. I really struggled. I love this program. It's a completely different level than World Machine. I think it's superior. But because I had learned World Machine first, I found it easier to texture in it because I could never get the contrast. So it was the color effects, the effects that really made it all kind of click. And that's when I started getting much more complexity.
I've tried texturing in World Machine. I don't it feels like it's its own thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, you did get nice results. But I don't know, what you're showing here to me makes a lot of sense. But of course, because you figured it out, so you're just explaining it.
Yeah. So the vegetation node, I'll plug that in at the end. And you have to plug in not just the color, but the height map itself. And here you can see this is just basically controlling where there's going to be a certain green.
Oh, that's super cool. So you can fake the look of like grass from a distance or something like that.
It's going to take a second.
But I like that it's called vegetation. Like it's what it is.
Yeah, it is exactly that. So here you can see like what is influencing it. So you could say like the bottoms of slopes.
Oh, that's so cool. Now it looks like there's like wild grass.
Yeah.
All over the top. That's so nice looking.
So we'll tone it down a little bit so that we still see some of the rock texture through it. Okay. So this area down here, I probably would want to add more stuff to it. The ideal method for this would be to kind of create a whole little section, and then kind of use the height map to blend it in, because it's a little bit too simplistic. But then again, at a distance, you know, that just looks like that's where the sand would be. So it might be fine. But anyway, that's it. You can see
Looks pretty good.
pretty easy.
Yeah, you made it look easy.
It took me a while to get it. But ultimately, it's not a lot of stuff. All it is kind of the same stuff over and over. It's using the texture map, the texture node, to just kind of create this breakup, plugging that into a stat map. These are all just getting as much variation as possible. That's why you're doing the texture, so it's not just a solid color, right?
Right, like from a distance that looks solid, but when you get up close, it has that sandy color has a lot of breakup.
Yeah.
Which is much better, than you say, like a solid color.
Yeah, and then just kind of using these data maps to create masks. So that being one mask, this being the height that is being combined with this guy here to create this. So it doesn't look like that big of a difference, but the tops are much wider now. That's driving the sat map, right? This one here is going to be like the sand in between the cracks. Oh, no, yeah, it is. And then this is just a more complex mask. But it's just masks, and effects to increase the levels on masks, and then color effects to increase or decrease the color on actual colors. So color effects I use for like RGB, and then the effects I'm basically using for everything that is black and white. And that's it. When you put it all together, this works. The one thing that also drove me crazy, the vegetation, very self-explanatory when you actually analyze the node, but I would just plug in the color and it wouldn't work. Make sure you plug in the displacement as well. When I mean displacement, I mean the actual geometry, which is here. Okay, and remember, you have to, if I come over here to this, you have to pin as underlay. That way, that's what it's showing you, the underlying model that is being textured.
All that stuff looks great. Like when you mask out the mountains, that way it didn't look the same as the plane. Like sometimes with textures, they kind of look like they have the same behavior, but it really wouldn't be like that. Like the sand has that flat color, and then the mountains are very different from like the kind of the medium elevation.
Yeah. The cool thing is, once you have this set up, let's just say that we were to come over here, like you love this map and you're building a gigantic planet, and you decided that, you know what, I want to create a crater world. So let's just come over here. It's all craters, and there is a mountain in the center. Okay, so let's just say like this is what you wanted. All you'd have to do is just replace that input, or the output rather, with this guy, and the texture should just propagate over. There's probably a shortcut just to replace it that I don't know yet.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. But if I just do this, sometimes it gets a little finicky because it's calculating it all. You can see, just plug that in there. I'm going to set this to 1K while I do this. Okay, so let's plug that in there. And lastly, Vegetation.
And now you have like a really nice, basically preset.
Well, check this out. It looks terrible right now because I still have this
I see.
pin as underlay. So you have to turn that off. Come over here. Pin as underlay.
There you go. That's really cool.
And it looks like one of these guys is still doing something. So that's my slope. That's why I'm getting something there. Okay, there we go. Yeah, the flow definitely looks weird, but whatever. You get the idea.
Yeah, but you have something really good to start with.
Yeah.
Really nice system.
Yeah, so it looks like the height probably needs a little tweaking here. Yeah. Super sensitive. All right, so something like that.
Oh, that's
you go.
cool. That looks neat.
So again, it's not perfect, but we just got this in a couple of seconds, right? And then you create another terrain, just replace it, replace it, replace it, and there you go. So anyway, that was the first step. So we're sorry that we had that issue with GAEA. You know, that's completely out of our control. There's no planning or not planning enough for that. It just doesn't work. It literally was turned on before. The problem is when we're doing the stream, we have to close we can't have 3 programs open at the same time, or sometimes even 2. So when we close one,
Yeah, the stuff that we're running is really, really
heavy
on our graphics card. Like if it was just like ZBrush or something, it would be easy.
Yeah.
But like having Unreal, and then for some reason Premiere being too heavy.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Anyway, guys, that's it. If anybody has any questions, let me know. But yeah, that's it.
I thought it was cool.
Yeah.
It looks like a lot of fun. I don't do the GAEA stuff. Miguel does all of it. We split our task because we're such a small team.
Yeah. So if you guys want to follow us, just check us out at Half Empty Studios on Instagram. We post, our images and stuff. So November 17th, the premiere of this thing, Voice in the Hollow. We're super excited. There's a few cool things that we haven't shown yet, just so there's something new to show the last day.
Yes. Even if you've been watching all the streams, you haven't seen it all together.
Yeah, but there is one cool little thing we added in there. And yeah, that's it, guys. So thank you. Sorry about that GAEA hiccup. We do love GAEA. I don't know what was going on. And we'll see you guys later. Let me kick this thing off. See you guys next week. Bye-bye.